This is Nick with Ultimate Motorcycling, and today we just wrapped up riding the brand new 2025 Triumph Speed Twin 900. Now you guys know what the Speed Twin 900 is. It's been that gateway into the Triumph family for a pretty long time until the Speed Twin 400 came around. But let's wind back the clock a little bit. In 2015, Triumph delivered this bike to the market as a Bonneville derivative, something that really captured that Bonneville essence, but added a little bit of panache, some, well, speedierness to it, we'll say. That's not a word, but it is now for the sake of this video. Now, fast forward a few years, it's been given a few updates, but this is the most significant one that we've seen to date for the 2025 model year. Now, what we're getting is a big upgrade to the electronics package with IMU supported rider aids. We're also getting some massive upgrades with suspension and the chassis overall, and the styling is, I don't want to say redone extensively, but yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Now for $9,995, they've done a pretty sweeping revision overall. It's not a from the ground up restart, still the same engine, same frame, but overall, this is just making that middleweight, now middleweight, Speed Twin offering much more competitive. So that's what we're going to talk about in this first ride review, and I want you guys to stick around. Okay, first things first, let's talk about that 900cc parallel twin engine. As you guys can see down here, that is the high torque version. Now, it is the same engine that we are familiar with from the previous generation. Makes something like 64 horsepower and 58 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the only changes that they've really made this year is to the actual fuel mapping of it. They've made that ride-by-wire a bit smoother and just overall improved what I would say my memory from this motorcycle's throttle response. That said, talking about the engine, those that have ridden this bike before, current owners will be familiar with what's going on here. You get a nice, lovely, approachable amount of torque down low, and it carries through before tapering off in the upper rev range, as most parallel twins do, especially of this British ilk. Now, 900 cc's, that's nothing to sneeze at for sure. But riders that are graduating from a lower displacement motorcycle aren't going to be caught off guard by the performance you have at hand. Remember, we're not dealing with enormous horsepower numbers. What this engine is about, much like the larger 1200cc parallel twin engine that's found in the T120, Speed Twin 1200, Scrambler 1200, etc., what you're getting is that rich torque, okay? So you're going to be able to carry that through corners, get on the gas. It's nice and lovely, nice and approachable. It's never going to spook you. You know what I mean? That said, with the 5-speed gearbox that you have going on here, if you're getting after it, you're probably going to be doing a little bit more shifting just to keep it on the pipe, so to speak. What we mean by that is just keeping it in its nice, comfortable power band. For me, that's in that upper 3,000 RPM range, all the way up to about mid 5.5. That's kind of the sweet spot for this engine. But overall, it's that classic Bonneville parallel twin engine. Sound, feel, and vibe. Sounds excellent. I mean, even with the stock mufflers and everything on it, it sounds very, very good. And the fueling is nice. Now, this year, we did get 2 ride modes. We're getting a road and a rain, in addition to the IMU supported electronics that I mentioned before. So that's traction control and cornering ABS. I think that's a big value for this motorcycle that's going to have broad appeal. Like I said, a lot of people come into the saddle of the Speed Twin 900. So we're getting more advanced electronics. Ride modes, you have road and rain. Road is what we use primarily throughout the day. Trying rain mode, it's self-explanatory. It just makes this throttle a bit more slack, really takes that edge off. Traction control, it can be a bit conservative at certain times, but it's not really going to get in your way, even if you're having a bit of fun and things like that. Also, you can turn it off, so more experienced riders don't need to complain about it. Or if you want to hork up some wheelies or something like that, do some clutch ups, yeah, I guess you could do that. But moving on, and what I really want to talk about are the updates to the chassis, and that means suspension. We're now dealing with a 41 millimeter Marzocchi inverted fork, replacing that traditional fork. So we're getting more stiffness out of the front end. Okay, that's a very important thing, with just a higher quality and higher level of damping from this style of fork anyway. We're not dealing with the old school just damper rod. It's a bit primitive with the traditional fork. This is a step above, definitely, okay? And you're adding that stiffness, so it's just gonna keep the chassis a bit tighter. Moving to the rear, Marzocchi twin shocks with preload adjustment, non-adjustable in the front. Basic suspension setup overall, but this year we've gained this piggyback reservoir. Now the big change overall to the suspension, spring rates in the front pretty much relative as before, and damping's kind of the same, but they've upped the damping rates in the rear, specifically, according to the brand, up 50%, both with compression and rebound. So really, this is still a street sprung and damped motorcycle. It's still designed for the road, you know, to gobble up those potholes, which is, it does nicely, but they've really tightened up the chassis and still kept both compliance and comfort. So for me, I think that's a big plus, because arguably the prior bike could have been too soft, especially if you start pushing it and actually having some fun in the canyons. Because let's be honest, the modern classics, despite their classic look, they can actually go pretty hard, especially with the 1200 iterations. Now, the shocks definitely a step up, you know, compared to last year, but really that's going to bring us into the handling conversation. And what's going to separate the 900 from the big brother, the 1200s, is the fact that this is a pretty petite motorcycle overall. It feels like it, not cramped, but it feels light and whippy. And they've achieved that through a couple different ways. First, the wheels are a little bit lighter. You're shedding a bit of unsprung mass. You're losing some, gyroscopic penalties. What's really gonna influence the chassis and the handling overall this year is the fact that they've ditched the steel swing arm, gone to an aluminum swing arm, just like the Speed Twin 1200, and shortened up that wheelbase. So this thing is quick on its feet. It's agile. And with the stiffness in the front, going back to the fork, you're getting a much more planted feel out of that. Now, the kind of, we'll say, more basic braking system is returning to the fold, is a bigger disc this time around, and we're getting a radial mounted caliper. So braking, in comparison to the previous bike, still, it's an improvement above that. Still, I think there's room to improve yet. We could get a little bit better feel out of something like a radial mounted master cylinder. But looking at the speeds you're achieving on this bike, you're never really, cresting into double digits, things like that quite often. A lot of people are going to be using this for just urban commuting, things like that, maybe some longer trips into the canyons, but don't get ahead of yourself. Now, last thing I want to talk about is the ergonomics. Ergonomics have changed quite a bit this year. Seat height is up about a quarter inch or so, if I get my numbers right. Basically just added a bit of padding here. Really, they've worked on continuing that Triumph tradition of keeping it nice and tight right in this area. They've also slimmed down the whole subframe. That's part of that styling update that I mentioned before that we will touch on in just a second. So the seat height's a bit higher. Handlebars are up and pushed forward a little bit. Foot pegs are lowered just a hair. I stand at 5'10" tall, 32-inch inseam. For me, despite the bike feeling pretty svelte, it's a compact motorcycle overall, I fit on this thing just fine. These ergos placed on any other motorcycle would be pretty much what I want for a casual, neutral, upright riding position. I think you're all nice and good there. I would prefer personally a bit wider handlebars because these are a bit narrow, but they match the motorcycle. In terms of ergonomics, Triumph really is focusing on the fact that they want a low approachable seat height. So we're looking at something that's like 30, it's either 30.1 or 30.4 inches, something in that ballpark. I can still plant my boots on the deck at a stop. Shorter riders should still be able to achieve that. And tall riders, well, they're never going to have a problem anyway. Now, just to touch on that styling thing, beauty's always in the eye of the beholder, so I'm not going to comment on that. let's just talk about the function. Fuel tank is a bit slanted forward. Their marketing literature was italicized. Cool. Side panel covers are redone. Headlight bezel, new LED headlight for the year, all redone. New dash, etc., etc. Really, it just makes the Speed Twin feel a bit more modern and cohesive while retaining those classic cues that we like from a Bonneville, for example. Huge gaps right here, kind of invoking that air-cooled engine sensibility, despite the fact that it is a modern water-cooled engine. Really, fit and finish is what I can objectively talk about, because you guys are going to like it or dislike it all on your own. Objectively, Triumph is one of the leaders in terms of fit and finish, and that comes down to the most affordable parallel twin modern classic in the whole family. Now, that's the 2025 Triumph Speed Twin 900 in a nutshell. I had a great time riding this thing. Thing handles well, nice and planted, nice and confidence inspiring, shifts well, goes well, stops well. What else is there to say about it? I'm not entirely sure until I get this thing back home and ride it around in the worst pavement in the world in Los Angeles County, California. But for now, I'm signing off here in Sotogrande, Spain. And for $9,995, they've taken the Speed Twin 900. Yes, it did get a little bit more expensive, but it's also gotten a bit more competitive within this segment. Now, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them down below. And the last thing I want to remind you guys is go ahead and be safe out there. Now, take care.